James Woolsey, Steve Rogers, Lieutenant Steve Rogers, Carl Higbee. We got two Navy men here on set, and Ebony Williams. Ambassador, I'd like to start with you. Ashley Webster is saying that this could turn out to be a treasure trove of information, and I think a lot of people are pretty excited that he chose not to wear a suicide vest, suggesting maybe he'd rather take living over martyrdom.
That's right, and that's a good sign. We got huge amounts of information from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was bin Laden's principal operations officer. He was waterboarded a number of times and didn't talk, and then did and gave a huge amount of information. So with one individual here, the French and Belgian intelligence and law enforcement could conceivably run into a treasure trove.
Would you say waterboarding, if you had a choice in the matter here, would you suggest waterboarding as a means of interrogation? I don't know legally if we could do that right now, but perhaps the Belgian or French officials?
Well, I think it would be up to the Belgian and French people who run their law enforcement and intelligence. Waterboarding is a unique problem for a lot of people because it is apparently quite surprising and shocking, and it often gets people to give information after only being used once. On the other hand, it is used in the training of our Navy SEALs and other special forces. So if it's torture, it's a strange kind of torture. We don't have our Navy SEALs have their fingernails pulled out, for example, to teach them what it would be like.
Right.
So there's probably a lot of debate in Europe on whether or not waterboarding is or is not torture, just as there is in the United States.
Well, let's bring in a couple of Navy men here. Carl Higbee, I think if you had your druthers, or if you were able to interrogate this Abdel Salam, you would consider waterboarding or some form of torture. You think that's appropriate in this situation?
Not consider it. I would encourage it. I mean, the fact of the matter is we need to set a precedent with this guy. I mean, this guy needs to be waterboarded until he tells us everything he knows. And when he tells us everything he knows, we need to keep waterboarding. And then when that hose runs out of water, you find another hose, and then we can convict him and sentence him to death. This guy needs to be set a precedent so people know, if I commit these acts of violence again, I'm going to be tortured. I'm going to be sentenced to death. I am going to have all the reign of all the power of all the governments on top of my head. We need to make that loud and clear right now.
You agree, Steve?
Absolutely. You can be sure he will not be given his Miranda rights upon being captured. Look, the key here, Charles, and the common denominator is that this was so successful in that they caught him alive. And I believe this, any means necessary to drag this information out of him. I'm glad it was in Belgium and not here, because they will aggressively, and when I say aggressively, right, Carl? Yep. Aggressively do what they must do to get that information out of him, and lives are going to be saved.
Yep. Ebony, Molenbeek, where he was captured, it's called Europe's Jihadi Central.
Right.
More people have gone there to fight in Syria and other places than any other spot in Europe. It's densely populated, 2 times the average Belgian neighborhood. But it's interesting. It was a safe haven for him. But someone tipped the law enforcement off. That's got to be a good sign also.
I think so. I think for us to know that he was captured alive, to Steve's point, that's going to be valuable. He was hiding kind of in plain sight. He was still in Brussels, you know, like you said, so many jihadi people there. Somebody said after 4 months they were not giving up on this. They tipped authorities off. They were able to get him. And I think that lets us know there are at least some people that are on the side of right concerning this issue in that community. And I think that's very, very important and valuable.
Ambassador, you know, a big part of law enforcement is to deter these sort of actions. The way he is treated, the way he's interrogated, the way he is paraded in front of the world, will that play a role in how and will the decision makers, will the politically correct crowd say, hey, we've got to take a hands-off approach to him. We want people to see that we're not going to necessarily harm this person, and maybe that will lure or seduce others who want to leave ISIS or leave the terror organizations. Is that the way you think this may go down?
Well, it's possible. This is going to be up to Belgian intelligence, or if they extradite him to France, French intelligence. We aren't going to have a say in it in the United States, as far as I know. I think that it should be effective. It should be interrogation that is effective, but I don't think one needs to step over the line into torture in order to do that. As I said, I think there's a very good argument that waterboarding should not be considered torture because it is not permanently damaging, and it's something that we do voluntarily. We had journalists be waterboarded so they could write better articles about waterboarding. Journalists don't have their fingernails pulled out. So I think you can get to a reasonable indication of interrogation techniques in using waterboarding in extreme circumstances without saying that it's torture. Some people say it is. I think that's not really correct.
Charles, keep in mind that the soft approach that we've taken all these years has resulted in beheadings, people put in cages and drowned, all sorts of torture on their part. They don't care whether we're going to treat someone nice.
It's a recruiting tool for them.
Yeah. And
it's an intimidation tool for them.
The ambassador's absolutely right. You know, he's taken a very measured approach and an intelligent approach. But my point is this: we have to play by very tough rules now. We're at war.
If we flop on this, they're going to see this as precedent. They're going to say, oh, it's not that bad. Go ahead and do it. And things are going to get worse. We need to treat this guy with the utmost ferocity. And if they want me to, they put me in a room with him for
That's
4
why
hours.
we need the Navy to take care of business. Army or Navy.
This is not.
I'm going to go with
This is not just a crime that should be treated as a crime, a robbery or something like that. We are at war with theocratic, totalitarian, genocidal, imperialist maniacs, and we need to understand that.
That's true. It can't be treated as an isolated incident, right? We know this thing has legs and it stems, and certainly we have to kind of look at, and I'm saying this as a criminal defense lawyer, it's okay to kind of take that into the circumstances when you're deciding what's reasonable here. This is not an isolated individual. This is somebody that is a part of a system of terror, and you're talking about at least 130 here, thousands potentially killed by this type of stuff.
Guys, when we come back, I want to pick up more on this, the terror